friends, and welcome to my channel. I'm Savannah and this is Grits and Gratitude. In today's video, we are going to be making a bunch of different apple recipes. We're going to be doing 3 different recipes, and what made this video come about is my best friend went to an apple orchard and she brought home a lot of apples. So she asked me, she's like, hey, you want some apples? And I'm like, sure, why not? I love apples. So she brought me a bunch of apples. So I had way too many that I could eat before they went bad. So I decided I would make a few fall recipes out of these apples. So we're gonna be making a Dutch apple pie, a apple sweet potato bread that was supposed to be apple pumpkin bread, but then I didn't know I didn't have pumpkin until after I was already started. So we adjusted, we made some sweet potatoes and it worked out fine. It actually turned out really good. And then we're gonna make some caramel apple sticky buns. So if those recipes sound like something that you're into, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I'd love to have you here with me. And yeah, let's get into it.
So first up, we are making our Dutch apple pie. So I am just peeling some apples. I peeled about 4 of these, I believe. I used a couple of Granny Smith and a couple of Pink Lady. And then I am gonna slice these pretty thin and place them into a bowl. After I got all the apples into the bowl, I added some plain granulated sugar, some brown sugar, some lemon juice, some flour, and then some cinnamon and some nutmeg. We're going to toss this around and coat those apples. It's going to seem kind of dry and weird, but once the apples cook in the pie, it's going to let out a lot of liquid, and that flour in there is going to thicken that liquid up. So in my pie plate, I am just spraying it with some nonstick spray. I use the baking kind that has the flour mixed in, and I am just putting in a store-bought pie dough, and I'm going to place the apples into the pie shell, and then we're going to make our topping. So after the apples are in there, I press them down so we can fit the topping in there and stuff won't get messy. So in the same bowl that I had the apples in, I am just adding some sugar, some brown sugar, some flour, and some butter. And we're just going to mash this up until it becomes crumbly. This is what it will look like once you get it all incorporated. You don't want it smooth like a dough. You just want it crumbly. And you're just going to sprinkle that all over the top of the pie and to try to cover up all of those apples. And then you're just going to kind of pat it down so none of them fall off when you go to put it in the oven. And this baked on, I think, 375 for about 45 minutes. I will leave the recipe linked down below. This apple pie was wonderful and it was really easy to make. I highly recommend trying this recipe. When we sliced the pie, we served it with a little bit of vanilla ice cream, and it was great. This would be a great thing to bring to any kind of gathering just because it's easy to put together, but it's very impressive as far as flavor. So give it a try if you have a dessert that you need to bring somewhere. Next up, I am making some apple sweet potato bread. Originally, it was supposed to be apple pumpkin bread, but I didn't realize that I didn't have any pumpkin until after I had already started mixing everything, and then I went to my pantry to get some pumpkin, and it was not there. So I just diced up a couple of apples. You're going to need about 2 cups, and in my bowl, I am putting some flour, some sugar, some cinnamon, some nutmeg, some ginger, and some allspice, and then a little bit of baking powder and salt. And then in another bowl, I'm going to mix up my wet ingredients. So I have some eggs, oil, and then the mashed sweet potatoes since we didn't have the pumpkin. When I realized it, I just threw the sweet potatoes in the microwave and then scooped out the centers and mashed them up. But we're going to take our wet ingredients and put it into our dry ingredients and fold that together until it is all mixed, and it's going to be really thick, so don't be alarmed. After we get it mixed up, we're going to add in our apples and fold those in until everything is combined. Now you can scoop this into muffins or put it in a loaf pan. I just chose to bake it in a loaf pan. So I put the batter in the loaf pan and then I started making the topping. So it's very similar to what we did for the apple pie, just flour, sugar, cinnamon, and some butter. And we're just going to crumble that up and put it on top, and this is going to bake for a little over an hour just because it's a pretty big loaf. I know it doesn't look that big, but that loaf is sitting on a dinner plate, so it is huge. So I brought some to work and everybody really enjoyed it. This is what it looked like when it was sliced up. You can really tell how moist that loaf is, and I think it would make beautiful muffins. I just think this would be a great recipe to fix ahead of time for breakfast and have something that you can enjoy all week. And the last recipe we are going to make is some caramel apple sticky buns. So into a saucepan, I am putting some milk, some oil, and some sugar. This is going to go on the stove and it's just going to heat up until it's right about to boil. In another bowl, I am getting some flour and some yeast, and that's going to go mixed into that milk mixture once it cools down. If you add it while the milk is so hot, it will kill your yeast and it will not rise. So I took that off the stove and then I mixed in the flour. This was a great recipe to make if you don't have like a stand mixer. A lot of people don't like to make doughs and stuff like that because they have to do it by hand, but this one was really easy to make by hand. After we got that mixed in, I just put the lid on and set it on the stove to rise for about an hour. So here is the rest of the flour we're going to add in later. So it has some baking powder, some salt, and some baking soda. And I just mixed that up and set it aside. And after it rose, I just added that in. And then I transferred mine to a greased bowl because it was getting kind of late and I wasn't going to finish these that night. So I just refrigerated the dough overnight and it was fine. But I did go ahead and make my caramel apples for the inside of the rolls. So to do that, I have some apples that I diced up and I'm just cooking those for a couple of minutes until they start to soften. Then I'm going to put those on a plate, and into that same skillet, I'm going to add 1 stick of salted butter. And I'm just going to let that melt. Once it's melted, I'm going to add in a cup of brown sugar, and I'm going to whisk that around and cook it until that sugar starts to dissolve into that butter. After it has started dissolving, I'm going to add in some heavy cream, just a little bit at a time. Be careful for steam because it will bubble rapidly. And after I got that incorporated, I'm going to add those apples back into the skillet and mix them in. You can add a pinch of salt if you wanted to, but I didn't have to because I used salted butter. And then I added some cinnamon and I just let that cook until it thickened up. This is what it looked like after I took it off the stove, and it thickened up even more when it was cold. I just sat that in the refrigerator overnight, and the next day we put our cinnamon rolls together. So I am flouring my countertop and I'm just going to dump that dough out, and I'm going to roll it out until we have a large rectangle. So after we get it all rolled out, we are going to put those caramel apples that we made the night before on the dough, and we're going to spread it out as evenly as we can. If you did want to just make cinnamon rolls, you could just spread some butter all over the dough and add some like brown sugar and cinnamon if you didn't want to go through all the steps to make the caramel apples. But the caramel apples were really good, so I do recommend giving it a try at least once. But after we get all the apples spread out onto the dough, we're going to start rolling it. And I just start little by little, and I try to roll it as tight as I can. And once we get it all the way rolled up, I kind of smush the ends in a little bit because they tend to be a little bit thinner than the rest of the roll. I'm going to pinch that dough so that none of the filling comes out, and then I'm going to start slicing it and placing it into some greased cake pans. These are just 9-inch cake pans, and I had enough rolls to fill up 3 of them. While they are baking, I am just going to make the caramel sauce to go on top. So again, it's very similar to the caramel we made for the apples. So it just has butter and brown sugar and some heavy cream. The only difference is after you add the heavy cream, you also add in some powdered sugar and give that a whisk. That's going to thicken up the icing, so it's actually more of like an icing instead of just caramel sauce. You can add as little as 2 cups of powdered sugar up to 4 cups of powdered sugar just to get it whatever consistency that you like. There's really no right or wrong way. This is what the rolls look like when they come out of the oven. They baked for about 15 minutes, just until they were golden brown. And as soon as they come out of the oven, you're going to take the icing that you made and spread it on top of all of the cinnamon rolls. These were so good. We really enjoyed them, and everybody we shared them with really enjoyed them as well. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you found one of these recipes intriguing and something that you would maybe like to try. I'll leave all the recipes that I used down below, and hopefully you guys can make some of these and enjoy them as much as me and my friends and my loved ones enjoyed these. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.